So during this entire class, I've talked about personalizing your productivity and personalizing your framework. Now I'm going to show you how I did that with one student in particular. So this student is a freelancer. He also has a 9-to-5 job as well, but he works remotely. So he's able to do things from home, which can be a challenge for a lot of people. He has no kids. He's in his late 20s, early 30s, and he really wants to have some healthy habits that stick. He's also a night owl, like me. So there's lots that he's trying to do, and he's been managing his tasks with email for the longest time. He didn't have a framework in place. So we started off by just having him build a framework, like just the bare bones beginnings of it. So what we did was we looked at his habits that he wanted to build. So what I did was I introduced him to a task management application. In this case, it was Todoist. And I said, let's get you on a list making frenzy here. So let's get you dumping things out of your head and directly into the inbox of Todoist. And that's what he did. Then I had him go into his email application and rummage through his email to find things that had not been dealt with. So what we did was we archived anything that had been dealt with, and he went through the horrific experience of looking at his oldest email and realizing it had expired almost 3 years ago. So we went through all of that process with him. And then we moved the emails that he really wanted to take action on into Todoist. And that was a really, really important step because now he could see the integration between these things. Then we took a look at his physical space, his desk, which was a mess. He had stuff everywhere, random notes with just phone numbers and passwords that he didn't know what they were for. And we dove into that. We provided the ability for him to write them down on a sheet of paper, going through that strike-through system process that I've illustrated to you before. But one of the things that we did do for that space that really I think is important for anyone to do is we bought a physical inbox. Like we went to an office supply store, and he did this and got an actual physical inbox. So that way he had a place that he knew where all these physical goods had to go. So now he had a place for all this stuff. He had a place for his digital stuff, and he had a place for his physical stuff. Then we dove into what tasks he needed to create to build those healthy habits, and we started to add some labels and some modes to that into Todoist. So we did that. We added, why in the world he was doing this stuff. Not so much the what, but the why behind it. And we started with those 3 words that I mentioned earlier. So he wanted to be healthy, and he wanted to be happy, and he wanted to have some kind of stability. And those were 3 strong words for him. And so we started to attach those words to his tasks. And that all of a sudden translated to when he was capturing them on paper. So he was writing things down and trying to figure out if he should even complete them, and he was attaching those things. Will this make me happy? Is this a healthy choice for me, both mentally, physically, or otherwise? And is this something that's going to promote stability? And so we started doing that. And from there, we went to theming his days, which took the longest for us to do because he had such a dynamic schedule that he couldn't wrap his head around why theming his days was going to be the big game changer for him. Because what was happening is he was working in the Today view a lot in Todoist, and he was moving his emails around, but moving them generally to something he would deal with today or the next day. But once we started to theme his days, and I actually sat down with him and worked backwards from his certainties to his uncertainties when it came to theming his days, he was able to figure out where to put stuff. So he was getting more intentional with when he should reply to that email. Should he put it in the Wednesday folder or the Friday folder? And he knew based on his theme days which folders these belonged in. He started to look at when he was scheduling tasks in Todoist and putting them in the right spaces based on his themed days. So all of a sudden he went from somebody who was using email to organize his tasks to random sheets of paper everywhere to somebody who knew when he woke up in the morning, instead of saying, what am I going to do today? He'd say, what day is it? And then he would start there and work his way to his to-do list. And his calendar being free and clear, he only had a couple of appointments per day, and he had more freedom, which gave him more time, which allowed him to slow down and create real impactful work. One of the things that didn't work were energy-based modes. They just didn't work with him, and I was surprised because he's a night owl, and I thought that that would be an area that he would want to make sure that he focused on. But he was actually really good with the time-based modes. That was just something that really resonated with him because he was all about trying to get as many of these little things done as possible throughout his day so he could focus on his real deep creative freelance work later on. So it's important for you to look at what types of modes are really going to work with you and let those stick. You have to try a few of them, but for him, it really wasn't energy-based modes that worked all that much. Journaling, we tried to do free-form journaling. That's often what I recommend. He needed to have a template in place, which is actually kind of freeing for him because he wanted to know what he did, what he didn't do, and he wrote down the 3 things that he wanted to do the next day. So it was very categorical, very almost tactical in a way that worked for him, whereas someone might just want a free flow and say, hey, here's what I did at home, here's what I did at work. So the great thing is that he actually is journaling, and that doesn't work for everybody either. The last thing that didn't really work for him was in Todoist there are 3 different levels of priority. There's orange, yellow, and red. And in this Todoist project that we share, which you can see here, there's 2 of us sharing it, this is how I worked with him, is that we renamed what each of those priority flags meant. So instead of it being priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3, the orange meant things that were really important for us to cover. And yellow meant things that are repeating. And you can see here that anything yellow has got a repeating sign next to it. So again, he could personalize this process, and every student I've worked with on this, those flags mean something different. They rarely mean priority 1, priority 2, or priority 3. So the great thing about a framework is that you can actually change what it means to you and personalize it along the way so that it works for you, because that's ultimately who it's meant to serve.